This is Your Own Best Company, a podcast for people who love to work alone. Hello there, everybody. This is Franklin Taggart, and this is Your Own Best Company, a podcast for people who love working alone. It's not that we're antisocial, and it's not necessarily that we're even shy or timid people, but we just have a propensity to really like the closed door with our tools and our imagination and being able to get things done that way. My guest today is someone I've just met. We've crossed paths before in one of my favorite online mixers, but this is actually the first time that we've actually had a chance to have a conversation. His name is Mark Herschberg, and Mark is the author of the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. And he's also the creator of the Brain Bump app. We're going to be learning a little bit about both of those things today. What we need to know about Mark is that he has 3 degrees from MIT, and he's taught at MIT now for over 20 years. He's the owner of 12 patents, and he has launched startups, new ventures at Fortune 500s, and new educational programs. Probably far too many to mention in the time that we have, right, Mark?
Well, but we can skip those.
Well, I just wanted to welcome you and thank you again for reaching out after the mixer and introducing yourself. I'm really excited to introduce the work that you're doing to the people who listen to this podcast. I think you're going to have a lot to say. I'm very curious. 3 degrees from MIT, that first of all just tells me that you're extraordinarily committed and that you've persisted to a level that many people don't. And I'm curious, what led you to that level of achievement?
That's a nice way to put it. It tells me I have trouble focusing because I didn't want to pick just one area. My undergraduate degrees are in physics and EECS. And even though you think, okay, there's some overlap, that that's physics-based. I said, no, it happens to be an EECS degree, but really I went for the CS side of it. And when I did my graduate work, there I focused on an area called cryptography, which is math theory effectively. Yeah. And there's really we didn't do any hardware in that. So I pick disparate areas. I just have trouble making up my mind. And even right now, as you noted, I have the book, which is separate from the app. And then I have other tech startup companies that I do that's separate from the book and the app because I can't focus on just one thing.
Well, in this particular group of people, that ability to have many focuses is seen as a superpower. So you're in good company here. I'm also very curious to hear about what is it that you teach at MIT?
Class we created at MIT, it's referred to as the Career Success Accelerator. Years ago, we got feedback from companies saying, when we go to hire people, there are skills we're looking for: leadership, networking, negotiating, communication. We can't find these skills in the people we hire. This is not unique to MIT students or engineers or even college students. They're saying these universal skills we can't find. Mm. And when we heard this, we said, well, our job is to produce students who you want to hire. So there's a gap here. Let's address that. And we created the program to get these skills instilled in there. And if you think about your own education, you probably heard for years, oh, networking is so important. Mm-hmm. We all heard that. I heard that when I was a little kid. Everyone said this for years. When did anyone stop and actually say, this really important skill, let me teach you how to do it? We just assume people learn. And whether you're a solo practitioner or you run your own business with lots of people under you, or you work for a different one, these skills all apply, and we need to get into our educational system.
Besides networking, what are some of the hallmark skills that you're teaching?
I break it down to 10 skills. And I say I break it down. Now, I didn't come up with this list, but depending on who you ask, the list could be anywhere from about 6 to 36 skills. The way I organize it, 10 skills: how to create and execute a career plan, which doesn't just mean how do I get the next job title, because some of us my job title's set, but how do I think about growing myself? Second is working effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something like managing your manager or understanding corporate politics, which even as a consultant, it's really helpful to understand this. Third is interviewing. Now, there's plenty of content out there as a candidate. How do I answer? Or what's your weakness? Okay, you can find that. But many of us have to be interviewers. We have to interview other people. And again, no one has trained us. So that's a skill we need to actively think about. Then leadership and management. And I break management. So leadership is separate from management, at least in an educational sense. In reality, we use them together.
Yeah.
And management, I break into the people side and the process side of management. And then the third group of skills, interpersonal dynamics, that covers communicating, networking, negotiating, and ethics.
Wow. That's a pretty comprehensive list. And what came to mind as you were speaking about that is that you probably just put a few hundred career coaches out of business.
Here's the thing about these skills. I put them in a book, but I am the first to say just reading a book is not enough. It's like learning a sport or music. You can't read a book on how to play baseball and say, okay, got it. You need that baseball coach. You need to do it and try and reflect and learn.
Yeah.
And so coaching is certainly one way to do it. Another way to really develop these skills is to create a peer learning group. Now, for companies, I say create these within your organization, create groups of around 6 to 8 people in size. But if you don't do it with your company, or if you're a solo practitioner, go create your own group, create a local meetup group, find other solo practitioners. You probably already have some of these groups, because we know being alone, working alone is one thing, but being completely isolated 24/7 is another.
Yeah, that's not good.
You've got your peer groups and say, hey, who wants to work on our negotiation skills? Let's get a group together. And what you can do is engage with some content. So yes, you can use my book if you want. You don't have to use my book. You can use other books, articles. You can go get negotiation case studies if you want to actually role play and practice. But it's really in that discussion. And again, about communicating, team building, leadership, all these skills, thinking through your career, it's in the discussion you have with other people. And that's where you learn. So whether it's coming from a formal coach or in your peer group, that's how you're going to develop these skills.
So is this class at MIT, is this a required class now for people before they graduate, or is it just an elective?
It's an elective.
Oh,
I
that's a
hope
shame.
someday it's required. We've been getting at our peak, about half of the undergraduate students would take it.
Yeah.
We're finally looking to expand to the graduate students. I'd love to expand this to other colleges and universities. I've been trying to do that. One day, cross my fingers, hopefully one day this will happen.
Well, it occurs to me that the book then, the thing that you've got there with your book is an evidence-based learning tool. You've got something there that's backed up by all of this evidence that you've collected through the work that you've done with the students at MIT. And that's one of the things that I think separates what you've done from many of the career books that are available right now, is that you do have some significant evidence to back it up. Can you talk a little bit about, as you were working with these students, when did you start to realize that there was a book there?
First, thank you for knowing that evidence, because the book itself, what we discuss, it comes from a lot of the research that's done by Sloan professors and others, because in academia, you pull in ideas from your peers. So we had the underlying research about these particular skills. And then years of teaching. This is battle tested, as you noted. One of the most common pieces of feedback I get is that they'll say, I'm reading your book, I'm on a page, and I have a question. As soon as I turn the page, you've answered the question. It's not that I'm that smart. It's that I've done this for so many years. I know what comes next. 9 out of 10 times, here's the question I get. And this has happened from teaching at MIT and elsewhere.
Yeah.
Now, the book, you asked about how it started. I'll first note the book is not just for college students or just for engineers. The
Right.
class, we do a little more orientation to our STEM undergrad students. The book was written generally. But the
Okay.
way this came about, one of the things I found is our students would get this during the semester, and we want them to apply the skills during the summer. Now, if you've ever taught students, you know that as soon as they walk out of the final, we don't have a final in our class, but when you do, as soon as they walk out of the final, all the information pours out of their brains. You just forget everything as soon as it's over.
Yeah.
That's how I was as a student. So I said, well, there's a disconnect about when we give them information and when they need the information. I want to overcome that gap. I want to help them retain it months later when they're in their internships and years later when they've graduated. So I thought, well, let me write up some notes, because our class, it's not me and the other instructors lecturing at the students. It is this hands-on discussion-based group that we help lead and moderate. It's
Yeah.
what I suggested you do. This comes from how we teach. So I thought, well, let me just write up some notes. The students aren't good at taking notes while they're discussing. And I really thought I was writing 20 pages of notes. That's it. I'll write this up. We can give it to the students. Well, 20 pages became 40, became 80. And once it passed 100, I said, I think this is a book. And if this is going to be a book, okay, it shouldn't just be written for STEM undergrads. And that's where I generalized it. I went to friends of mine who are authors. I got their input, and I really had the core content, but shifted how it was being communicated and to whom.
Well, there's so much there that is inspiring to me as both a creator and a burgeoning author, because the process that you're talking about is one that I'm actually kind of going through myself right now. And it's exciting to see that you have a product on the end that is actually in line with a product that I would like to introduce as well. So I find some inspiration in your story. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Let me note for yourself and other authors or budding authors who are listening, when I did this, now I've built a lot of tech startups.
Yeah.
I know some of the business aspects. I also knew what I didn't know, which is a lot of the mechanics of publishing. I read about 1,500 articles on every aspect of publishing I could find. I saved links to the 200 or so most useful.
Yeah.
And I've got that on the Cognosco Media website. I know we'll be putting that up on the screen. And we'll be sharing the social links.
Yes.
Under author resources. So it's cognoscomedia.com/resources, or
Okay.
the menu item is author resources. These are links to everything you might need to do as an author, whether it's how do I find an agent if you're going the traditional route, if you're self-publishing, how do I pick a font? No one ever talks about fonts. And it's not going to make your book, but if you pick the wrong font, it can break your book.
Yeah.
How do you think about writing an effective back cover? How do you market your book? Whichever way you go, you have to market. So I've got them all organized by category. It's not my advice. It's the best advice I found from others. And I put that out there to help other authors.
Well, we'll make sure to include that link in the description so that people can click on it and go right there. Can we talk a little bit about where do you see people who are in the middle of their career? Where do you see them benefiting from what you've written here?
Great question. And our readers aren't just people in their 20s and 30s. We have a lot of readers well into their 40s, 50s, had a few even in their 60s. The way the book is written, we mentioned these 10 skills. They're 10 separate chapters. You don't have to read the book start to finish. It's a toolkit. Grab the wrench when you need a wrench, put it back and grab the hammer when that's what you need. So if at any point in your career you say, I wish I was better at networking, jump right into chapter 7, networking.
Yeah.
If then you say, I now have to start interviewing people for my client or for myself, okay, go to chapter 3 on interviewing. Then you want to get better at negotiating. Jump to chapter 9. So you can move around. You can pick up each piece. Each chapter stands alone.
Yeah.
Each chapter has a mental shift and then concrete, actionable things you can do. So really, it's a toolkit. And wherever you are in your career, if there's a skill you want to get better at that I cover, the book can work for you. Or go buy a book dedicated to that topic if you feel you want to spend more time or get deeper on it than what I can do in a chapter.
Yeah. One of the things that you touched on earlier that I wanted to come back to is the whole idea that these skills are things that we were not taught, but we also have to treat them not as something that you can cram for the test and then, run with it. I think one of the things that you touched on earlier that I really want to reiterate is that these skills really require practice in order to master them. Can you give me an idea from the students that you've worked with and the people that you've seen who have taken this material, what kind of practice regimen or what kind of practice expectations should people have as they start to work on these things?
Very good question. And I'm going to share first a story about an instantaneous change.
Okay.
We teach networking skills at this class. And at the end of one of our boot camps, we have an intensive week-long boot camp as part of this year-long program. We have what we call a networking lunch. The students all know about career fairs. Show up and hand someone your resume. In life, we don't have career fairs.
Right.
I don't show up and wait in line and hand a resume. In life, it's about networking. Yeah. It's about how we met. So we want to give them that experience. This is a lunch. We're bringing a bunch of people, and many of them do have summer jobs, but don't just say, hey, do you have a job? Oh, no, pass. Just go talk to people, build relationships. And I remember with one of my students, she was really just shy and nervous. And as the students got up to start to mingle, she kind of sat there. I felt like a mama bird watching my baby birds leave the nest. And okay, this one needed a little help. I walked her over to a friend of mine who happened to be there, who was in a field she was interested in. I did the introduction, and they all know these are students. They're new. They're practicing their networking skills. So it's a very friendly, supportive environment. So I brought her over to him. I got them started. Stayed a few minutes while the conversation went underway, and then I moved along to go keep an eye on others. Fast forward 2 hours as we give the notice saying, hey, we're wrapping up, finish your conversations. We're going to end in 5 minutes. And she was running between people, and she looked at me and said, I don't want this to end. She was so excited by the experience. And what we did in that moment, I mentioned there's this mental shift. In her case, it was going from networking as this awkward thing. It's, oh, isn't that kind of sketchy? You network and that gets you the job over someone else, and it's not really fair. It's nepotism. We changed her mindset to like it. Now, it didn't mean she was a master networker, but it meant going forward, she shifted from, I don't want to do those things to, hey, I'm open to trying this.
Yeah.
Now, of course, like sports or music, it's just doing it over and over. And it's knowing how you give your elevator pitch when it comes to networking, how to get out of an awkward conversation, how to do a follow-up. And these things just come over time.
Yeah.
Even things like leadership. I mean, you can do not only read a book on leadership, take a semester class, you can do a PhD dissertation. Even those of us who claim to be leadership experts who teach it, we can all still get better at. And that's true for all these skills. So it's a journey for all of us.
We're all evolving, aren't we?
Yes.
Well, the thing that I really appreciate about what you're saying here is that the first time may feel very awkward, but getting the first time over with quite often is all it takes for people to say, oh, that wasn't quite so bad, and I think I can do this, right? And there's one other thing. There's one other thing that came up as you were talking there, Mark, that I really wanted to ask about, and that is, a lot of the folks that I work with and a lot of the folks who listen to this podcast are people who are not trying to get hired by a company or by a corporation or an organization, But they are trying to find customers and partners and clients and relationships like that. One of the things that you were touching on there is that the same skills apply in those situations as well. Can you talk a little bit about, is there any differentiation at all between them?
I have been a W-2 employee, I've been a founder, and I've been a 1099 consultant.
Yeah.
And really the only difference is between me and the IRS. It's just how I do my finances and taxes.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I really think of it the same way. Now, there are certain dynamics. As a consultant, a couple hours a week, I'm more cognizant about, do I say, hey, you need to completely shift your strategy and here's why?
Yeah.
Well, that might be regardless of whatever de facto title I have, more akin to I'm a junior person at this company, even if I'm brought in at a senior level. So I do need to pay attention to the nature of the relationships, but really the fact that I'm paid one way or another, all these skills apply, and I'm still going to do the same job. I don't do it differently if they paid me as a W-2 versus a 1099. So
Yeah.
I think we need to shift the mindset. Those of us who are consultants and contractors, shift the mindset. Whether you call them a customer or an employer, doesn't really matter.
Right.
It's about doing the work. And it's not just getting the right answer, it's doing it, employing these other skills to be effective in our roles.
I just wanted to reiterate that the Career Toolkit book is something that anyone who is, trying to further their career, whether it's through a conventional corporate structure, organizational structure, or whether it's through entrepreneurship and that kind of thing, the Career Toolkit has something for you that's going to be relevant to your process. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right, because these skills apply to all of us.
I'm very curious about you personally. You've mentioned that one of the things that drove you to get 3 degrees at MIT and all of these different things that you've done and accomplished through your career is that you have a difficult time focusing. Can you talk a little bit about, has that been a lifelong pattern for you?
Yeah, I was being a little flippant. I can focus. In fact, my parents told me, even as a young child, even at age 2 or 3, I had a much longer attention span than most of my peers.
Yeah.
What I don't like to do is just one thing. In fact, this is probably why I've been drawn to startups, because if I had the same job that I'm doing for a couple years on end, that's not good.
Yeah.
As a consultant, I change who my clients are and who I work with and the nature of their problems, even if it's in the same set. As a founder, I am dealing with new problems every day. And even things I thought this was solved, they come up again when you're a founder, when you're a business owner. So I like that variety, and I like working on a variety of tasks. And so that's why in school, I didn't just want to do physics and not do these other fun problems in my other majors and minors.
Well, I'm curious how that then influenced your school experience. Did you ever experience any difficulty fitting into a standard school structure, or were they able to actually acclimate for that?
I don't think I had a problem so much in a standard school structure. I would get maybe bored in a couple of the classes, especially math and science, where I was usually ahead of it. But I found a lot of subjects interesting. I found history very interesting. I definitely didn't like Spanish. There I might get bored, but that's more, I just didn't like being there. And I hated Hebrew school.
Okay.
But education itself, I didn't have a problem focusing. And the variety of different subjects that I'd be exposed to in a day, your standard curriculum was probably good for me.
Yeah.
That's just how much I enjoyed that particular subject.
So it wasn't any one thing that you wanted to, spend all of your time on. It was that you really enjoyed the variety and the diversity of things and maybe some of the interrelatedness between them, I would guess.
Yeah, I certainly enjoyed some more than others.
Okay. I'm very curious. How did you ever end up in cryptography?
As a little kid, I was interested in secret codes.
Okay.
And secret codes, when you're a kid, you probably remember A is 1, B is 2, which is known as the Caesar cipher,
Yeah.
how to make invisible ink. And when I went to college, cryptography is a branch of computer science and mathematics. The
Yeah.
way we do secret codes today, it's with math, because if you just do the A is one, B is two, computers can break that very easily.
Yeah.
So now we use advanced mathematics. And I always liked math. And this was an interesting problem space. And it's not just about how do you keep something secret? How do I send you an email that no one else can read? There's a whole bunch of problems in this space that get very interesting. My graduate work was actually in online voting,
Oh,
which,
wow.
by the way, we should never, 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 never do.
Yeah.
Even though theoretically we can do it and we worked out the math, the reality, I'm going to sidetrack this for a moment, for it to work and be effective, the software needs to be completely secure, the operating system needs to be secure, the hardware needs to be secure, the chain of custody needs to be secure, and we're not going to get all that right.
Yeah.
And making it worse, if there's one problem, this can be exploited at scale on millions of computers, and millions of votes can change. So we should never, never do electronic voting for government. If you want to do it for voting your stock proxies, that's fine.
That's fine.
Just not for public elections. But it was a fascinating area in which to do research.
I was curious about that because I have two people in my family who are both PhDs in number theory, and cryptography was a big part of their education. And I was just curious about how you ended up there, especially with you said that you were kind of impatient with math and science.
Discrete math and number theory is, I think, one of the more interesting branches of mathematics. And so that's what led me down that path. I always liked math, as opposed to doing analysis or complex numbers. We did plenty of math in physics, some of which was pretty painful, but number theory was always really interesting to me.
That's amazing. Well, let's talk about another one of your hats. You're also an app developer, and one of the most recent apps that you've been working on and bringing to market is one called the Brain Bump app. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's all about?
We alluded to the problem earlier where I mentioned my students, they get trained during the year with all these skills, but then they don't apply it until later on.
Yeah.
And how often do we read a book or listen to a podcast episode, but we don't use it today? In fact, whoever's listening to this right now, they probably selected this episode. A few of them may have done some type of web search and found it, but most people are probably subscribers. And well, this came up as the next episode, and they're hearing it, but they're saying, yeah, this is all very interesting, but right now my big problem is I got to redo my books. I have a financial problem. None of this is relevant to me. Great advice, not relevant. They tune it out.
Yeah.
6 months from now, what we're talking about might be relevant, but no one goes back and says, now let me reread the book, or now let me listen to that episode again. We have a disconnect that where we read information isn't where we need information.
Yeah.
So how can we address this? And there's really two types of ways we use information. The first is just in time. So let's take networking as an example. You read it sitting on your couch. You need it a month later when you're going to some conference.
Yeah.
So what if 5 minutes before you walk into that event, you could get that quick refresh? All right, what are the tips? What do I do? How do I do this? Okay, great. You want to get that quick, just-in-time dump.
Yeah.
The other challenge is more foundational. Let's say you're a first-time manager. You don't know exactly when you're going to be needing some particular skill. No one's going to say at 9:17, that's when you have to do this. So what if every day you could just be reminded to keep these ideas top of mind? We know spaced repetition works.
Yeah.
That's a fancy name for why we opened our books and looked at our notes again before the test. But we don't go back and re-listen to an episode or reread a book. I even take notes on the books I read, but rarely do I go back and review the notes.
Yeah.
So the app is designed to address this challenge. And the app works as a combination of a book summary app, a flashcard app, and a daily affirmation app.
Okay.
It takes content from books, podcasts, blogs, classes, talks, all these different sources. It takes the key ideas, what you might highlight in a book, those 2 or 3 sentences you want to remember. That was the key point. Those are like flashcards in the app. Now, there's no question answers, just here's the advice you want.
Yeah.
So you can either say, hey, I need the advice right now. You've got the app in your pocket. So as you go to this conference and you want those networking tips, you pull out the app, you open it up, and then you can select every one of the tips is tagged. Think like hashtags on social media.
Yeah.
They're all tagged. So you say, let me get the tips tagged with networking, or the tips tagged with communications, or whatever your challenge is at the moment. And there they are. You can flip through them. You can save your favorites.
Yeah.
But then you might say, this is more a foundational thing. I really want to get better at this. So you can set the app so that every day at a time you choose, you get a push notification with one of the tips. You can turn notifications off. We never send you notifications you weren't expecting or didn't want, because I know how annoying it is to have an app constantly bugging you.
Yeah.
But you set up so 9 a.m. each day, you get a management tip. It's like a daily affirmation, but it's something relevant. And you want 9 a.m. because that's when you're going into work. That's when you're thinking about management mode.
Yeah.
You don't even have to open the app. It just pops up and you can swipe it away. We right now are focused on just business content, but we'll expand later this year. Imagine if at 6 p.m. you got marriage advice, because maybe you're having a marriage problem. You want that marriage advice at 6. At 9 a.m., that's not when you're thinking about your marriage. And at 6 p.m. isn't when you're thinking about your job. So what we're doing is we are making the content contextually relevant to you.
Yeah.
And that's a change in how we consume media.
Oh, it's a sea change. It's completely different from anything else that's out there. And the thing, there's so many things that I appreciate about how you've described it. One of the things that just really thrills me is the idea that I could set this up to help me to prepare for an interview or to help me prepare for a presentation, where it's like I could organize the information and then have the prompts timed to be released at certain times, so that as I'm going through the routines of my day, I'm being reminded of this, and it's working its way in to my consciousness in a much more desirable way. The other thing that really compelled me when you were talking about it is that it feels like one of the things that's missing with all of the information and content that is available now. We don't have effective ways to collect and curate it. And what you've created here is a contextual way to curate the information that's really important for you to keep and remember. And I'm excited to hear more about it, and I'm excited to try it myself, just based on what you've said.
I think you've gotten to the heart of it, which is it's not just a curation, that's half of it. And there are other tools, Microsoft OneNote, I think Evernote is another. And these are places you can store your notes, but how we access them. Because in theory, I could have my book as a Kindle and it's sitting there on my phone. I go, oh, well, before I go into this event, let me go to that networking chapter. But it's not an efficient recall.
Yeah.
And even if I have my notes, and I keep my notes in cloud drives. Okay, but so I have to go to the cloud drive. I have to search for the file. I have to skim through it. And here, by doing this tagging and by allowing for this passive as well as active recall of the content, what we're doing is making sure that you can get efficiently, literally within seconds, you can get the content that is contextually relevant for you. And that's what's, I think, the real innovation here.
For those of you who've been watching the video, you can see the website on the screen. For those of you who are listening on audio, the name of Mark's company is Cognosco Media, and that is spelled COGNOSCOMEDIA. And the website is cognoscomedia.com. And you can go there to find out all of the information that you would want about the Career Toolkit and about the Brain Bump app. There's also...
Actually, Sorry, that one only has stuff on the media and the app.
Ah,
The Career
okay.
Toolkit is on a different website. That's at thecareertoolkitbook.com.
All right.
Because I have separate brands, I do keep them separate.
In terms of people who are ready for a change in their career, and yet it's been a long time since they were involved in either a job search or in an opportunity kind of a identification process, for lack of a better term. Can you talk a little bit about how the book might fit in to a person in that situation?
Chapter one deals with career plans, which includes career pivots or changes, or even folks who want to get back into the workforce. And really, the way you want to think about this is recognizing that might not be a single step or it might not be instantaneous.
Yeah.
Imagine you are driving cross country from Boston to Seattle. And so you might head west on Interstate 90.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way, you say, you know what? I don't want to go to Seattle anymore. I want to go to LA. And LA, well, you're going to head down to Route 66.
Yeah.
But Route 66 doesn't intersect Interstate 90. So you've got to figure out, you can't just teleport from one to the other. You're going to look for what are the different paths I can take to shift lanes. And it might not be immediate. In fact, you might at some point go along an intermediate east-west, not just a north-south, how I get further south, an intermediate, maybe Interstate 50 for a little bit before you get on Route 66. And so when we think about our careers, we have at this moment a certain set of capabilities, our experience, our skills, the things we know how to do. There is a separate set needed for this role we want.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's a complete match. It completely overlaps and you go, great, I'm qualified. Please hire me. Here's why. But when you have that disconnect, and this is true whether it is a switch to a new job or new industry, or even I'm at this level, but I want to get to the next level, there is a disconnect. And even if you're a solo practitioner, say, well, I've dealt with clients of this size or in this space, I want clients of a bigger size or different space, you have that same disconnect. They're going to say, you don't have the experience. So think about what's that intermediate step. If, for example, I want to manage a team of 100 people, but I've only managed teams of 5 people, it's unlikely they're going to say, great, we'll put you in charge of 100 people.
Yeah.
But maybe I can find someone where I say, look, I know I haven't run a team of 15 people yet, but I know this space inside and out. I check every other box. So that's the one small risk you might take here. And I say, okay, I think you're ready to do that. You've got everything else. Right now I'm leading a team of 15. Yeah. And from 15, I can get a job where I'm leading a team, let's say of 40. And I'm picking numbers arbitrarily, but you want to do these shifts. You don't want to do one jump. It might be a few smaller ones.
Very good. Well, Mark, we've covered a lot of ground, but I feel like that we could probably cover a lot more. And one of the things that you talked about in your introductory letter was the possibility of talking about a shift in the way that we market that's going on right now. And I think that that's a relevant topic, but it's for another program. The thing that I would really like to find out next is if people want to know about the Career Toolkit. You have a specific website for that. Let's repeat what that website is again. TheCareerToolkitBook.com.
Yep.
Okay. And what would be the best next step for a person to take if they're interested in that?
Let me give you a few websites and hopefully I won't overwhelm folks.
Okay.
TheCareerToolkitBook.com is where to go if you're interested in these skills. And yes, you can see where to buy the book, Amazon, elsewhere. Everything else on that website is free. I put out a whole bunch of other articles. There's a bunch of free resources. I have links to other books I recommend, but I also have free downloads, including how you can create that peer learning group we talked about earlier, as well as links to other free online resources. Everything there is free, and that's at thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Okay.
If you're interested in learning more about the app and the thinking behind it, We mentioned and we've shown for those watching Cognosco Media, Cognosco media.com. But if you want to jump right to the app, just remember brainbumpapp.com. The app is completely free. And if you go to brainbumpapp.com, that will take you to the stores. It will show you how the app works. If you're interested in getting your content on the app, maybe you're a podcaster or author or other type of content creator or speaker, perhaps, at the bottom is a form where you can reach out. We can get in touch about getting your content on there. This is all at brainbumpapp.com.
Very good. Mark, I have one last question that popped up as you were just giving out that information. As a creator, one of the things that I know is that sometimes I'm surprised by either an application or kind of an unexpected turn of something that I've created and the way that people receive it or use it. I'm curious with the Brain Bump app, what's been the most surprising use case that you've found for that app?
One that came up fairly recently. The app is used by authors, for example, who want to both have their audience better remember their content, but also for many people who want to market their content and be top of mind to their audience, because now your audience is remembering you when they get that daily reminder. But I had one author, or rather an aspiring author say, can I use this before my book comes out? What can I do with this? And we thought about it, and what came up, on the back end, we do not track individual user behavior, but we do track how the content is being used. You can see, for example, if you have your tips in there as a content creator, how many people have favorited a tip. You don't know who they are, because, oh, this is popular.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we came up with is he can take the outline of his book. It's got the outline, all the chapters and subsections, and he'll put, here's the key takeaway. Here's the key ideas in each of those sections.
Yeah.
He's going to put them into the app and then say to his audience, go pick your top 10 things, or just go and like as much as you want. He's going to get all the data about what's popular, and that's going to tell him, oh, this section, everyone likes that. So maybe I should go deeper or do more in this section, but no one seems to like that content. So I should revise it, or maybe just drop that chapter. So he can get insights, and we didn't even think of it being used that way.
So you ended up with a market research tool that you did never expect to be a market research tool.
That's right. And one thing I've learned from building software is try to keep it as open as possible. Yeah. Because I have thoughts about how this will be used, but people will start to use it in new ways. In fact, I'll give you one other example. We have a social share. So the great thing is you say, oh, here's a tip. I really like this tip. I want to share it. We know people love sharing quotes on social media. Well, now when you share, it's like one of those social media planner tools, like a Canva is built into the app. So you can format, you make it pretty, you select the font color, or the font size, and the font type and the colors, and you can share easily on social media. And we thought, well, this is good, because when you're a content creator and put your content on the app, people will share it. That's what you want.
Yeah.
But some of the content creators said, wait, I want this because it makes it easy for me to share my content, because you make it pretty and then I don't have to make it pretty. You do that for me. Or even sometimes I want to share other content. So it's not just all my stuff. There's a 60-30-10 rule in social media. And so, well, this is great because I can just easily find and pull in other content to share. That's not how we thought about this originally, but if it works for people, fantastic.
Very cool. Mark, I'm really impressed with the resources that you're bringing to people. And I appreciate your creativity and your dedication to making things easier for all of us. Thank you again for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure.
So for those who are listening right now, I've had Mark Herschberg, who is inventor, author, app developer, jack of many trades and master of many trades, it sounds like as well. Cognoscomedia.com is his website. and you can find out a lot more about what he's doing there. And I always want to thank you for your time and your attention, your most precious resources. It makes me humbled to think that you would spend any of them with me. And I appreciate your subscription, your sharing, and your reviews. For Your Own Best Company, I'm Franklin Taggart, and I will see you next time. Thanks for listening to Your Own Best Company. If you enjoyed the show, would you do me a favor and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast host? If you really love it, leave me a review or share it with your circles. If you feel like your career is reaching a dead end, or you're feeling a deep sense of dissatisfaction in your work right now, I help people discover their gifts and then find or create new opportunities that are the best fit for their talent, experience, and lifestyle. Email me at coaching@franklintaggart.com for more information. I also help people start, finish, and launch creative projects, and I offer an ongoing marketing mastermind for solopreneurs and freelancers. More information on these programs and services can be found at franklintaggart.com. Thanks again for spending this time with me.